Did you know that some archived cases, which seemed buried forever, were solved thanks to clues that almost everyone ignored? Cold details, forgotten for years, that resurfaced to hit like an unrelenting punch to the face of truth. Today, I'll show you 5 of the most shocking, unexpected, and disturbing clues that turn dead-end investigations into explosive revelations. If you think old mysteries will never be unraveled, prepare to have your mind turned upside down. Imagine the impact of a seemingly insignificant detail that can flip the script and expose secrets so dark they defy even the coldest logic. In this video, every minute is a roller coaster of discoveries that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the impossible. Before we start, if you like true crime stories, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss anything. Now, stay with me because what I'm about to show you will challenge every certainty you thought you had. Let's dive in. 1. The case of the gold coin. In 1983, the body of Michael Harrington, a security guard, was found in an abandoned bank in St. Louis. Michael had been murdered during what appeared to be a poorly planned robbery, and the police were left without solid leads. There were no security cameras, and with few unhelpful witnesses, the case was soon shelved. Among the collected items was a rare gold coin catalog, but no one knew if it was relevant or just a lost object at the scene. Decades later, advances in forensic science reopened the case. Modern investigators decided to re-examine that forgotten coin, using a technique called touch DNA analysis, which identifies genetic traces left on small objects. Something the officers of the 80s could never have imagined. On the coin's surface, they detected microscopic skin fragments. DNA testing linked the evidence to Peter Campbell, who at the time had been a dismissed suspect. Now, with genetic evidence pointing directly to him, authorities had a solid lead. When confronted, Peter tried to dodge the accusations, but with proof in hand, he had no way out. Under pressure, he admitted to the crime. The robbery had gone terribly wrong, and Michael was killed in the process. This breakthrough brought long-awaited justice to the Harrington family. Modern forensic techniques had transformed a forgotten piece into powerful evidence. If you think that's impressive, the next case will show how a witness ignored for decades helped solve a crime that seemed unsolvable. 2. The disregarded testimony. In 1991, the brutal disappearance of 16-year-old Sarah Yarborough left the town of Maple Ridge, Washington, in shock. Sarah had left home for a school event but never returned. Her body was found near the school grounds, and the crime scene was disturbing. Detectives tried hard, but they had no solid leads. A young man reported seeing a strange-looking man hanging around the area that morning, but without concrete proof, the testimony was virtually ignored and soon forgotten. And so, the case went cold. Decades passed. Sarah's family remained without answers, as the investigation sank deeper into oblivion. But then, in 2018, science punched fate in the face. Investigators decided to use a powerful tool made possible by recent advances, genetic genealogy. Just to give you an idea, they took DNA samples collected from Sarah's body and, instead of running a simple comparison against known criminals, uploaded the DNA to a public genealogy database. Yes, the kind of database people use to discover distant relatives or genetic inheritance. It was a game of patience, almost like assembling a massive jigsaw puzzle, but scientists finally mapped out the suspect's family tree. That's when everything started to fall into place. Police tracked down Patrick Nicholas, a man who had never been suspected. When they connected the dots and arrested him, it was a real shock. And what makes it even more intense? Remember the young man who had seen the strange man in 1991? Well, the face he described back then matched Patrick. For years, that account had been ignored, but science insisted on reviving every detail. Genetic genealogy not only brought justice but also showed that nothing can be completely buried, not even after decades. A technology that seemed impossible just a while ago finally revealed the truth. Sarah's family, who had waited almost 3 decades for answers, saw the impossible come true. And the lesson is clear: even details everyone thought were irrelevant can one day change everything. If you found that case impressive, just wait until you hear the next one, where invisible fingerprints helped solve a mystery that seemed hopeless. 3. Invisible fingerprints. Now, if you thought the previous cases were impressive, this one will leave you speechless. The story begins in 1978, in a small town called Simi Valley, California. Back then, a heinous crime shook the community. Rhonda Wicht, a young mother, was found dead in her apartment. Next to her, her 4-year-old son, Donald, was also found lifeless, a victim of suffocation. The brutality of the case was something no one could forget. Police were desperate to find a culprit, and all evidence seemed to point to one suspect: Craig Coley, Rhonda's ex-boyfriend. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life in prison. Case closed, right? Wrong. Craig swore he was innocent, but the evidence at the time didn't work in his favor. He spent over 39 years in prison while the real killer roamed free. But fate wasn't done with this story. Fast forward to 2016, when a new team of detectives decided to take a second look at the case, using technologies that didn't exist in the 70s. They revisited the file and discovered something that changed everything: the fingerprints collected from Rhonda's apartment. The problem? Back then, fingerprint comparison technology was limited, almost laughable compared to what we have today. Using modern techniques, investigators digitally scanned the prints and matched them against an updated database. The result? None of the fingerprints matched Craig Coley. Those marks belonged to another person, an unknown suspect who had never been investigated. Science, once again, undid an error that had kept an innocent man behind bars for almost 4 decades. But it didn't stop there. Not only did the fingerprints clear Craig, but new DNA tests also showed that the biological evidence collected at the scene had no connection to him. He was finally exonerated in 2017, after 39 years of an unjust sentence. Imagine that, 39 years of your life taken away because of a mistake, and all it took to prove your innocence was a technology that took decades to exist. This case not only freed an innocent man but also highlighted how the judicial system can fail so devastatingly. The precision of modern analysis revealed the truth that time had almost hidden forever. Justice may be slow, but when it comes, it hits with full force. The next case I'm going to tell is equally unbelievable: a simple lost letter that, for years, no one thought would make a difference but ended up being the key to solving a decades-old mystery. 4. The missing letter. Get ready for another twist worthy of a movie. In 1975, wealthy and well-known businessman Henry Jacobs was found dead in his Virginia mansion. The scene was bizarre. Henry lay on the office floor, with signs of a struggle around him, but there was no clear evidence of who could have done it. Police did what they could, but without solid leads, the case was shelved. Years went by, and Henry's story became almost a local legend, something people occasionally talked about without hope that justice would ever be served. But then, in 2019, a new investigator with a habit of revisiting old cases stumbled upon something that no one had ever considered important: a set of Henry's personal files stored in the family mansion's basement. Among the paperwork, a letter caught his attention. It was a letter Henry had written to a close friend, days before he was killed, mentioning threats he had received due to a business dispute. He detailed his fears for his life and named someone specific, Richard Bell, a business rival who at the time was too powerful to be implicated without direct evidence. For decades, that letter had been lost among old documents, ignored as just another piece of paper without relevance. But now, with advances in paper and ink forensic analysis, investigators proved the letter was authentic and written during the period Henry mentioned. They also used new handwriting analysis techniques to confirm the document wasn't forged. With this new evidence, the police reopened the case and finally began to connect the dots. They also used modern technology to analyze old blood stains and footprints at the crime scene. The investigation pointed directly to Richard Bell, who had continued to live a comfortable life, thinking time had erased his actions. When confronted, even after all these years, he couldn't escape the evidence science had brought to light. The discovery of this letter and the use of forensic technology finally brought justice for Henry Jacobs, even if belatedly. The family, who had waited so long for answers, could breathe easier knowing the truth had finally come to light. Once again, science proved that even time can't hide everything. But don't worry, because the last case I'll tell is even more surprising. It shows how a cold clue, buried in the snow for years, revealed a secret no one expected. 5. The footprints in the snow. Imagine a mystery frozen in time, literally. In 1985, in the small town of Cedar Falls, Colorado, an 8-year-old girl named Amy Johnson disappeared during a brutal snowstorm. The entire community mobilized, and extensive searches were conducted, but the snow quickly covered any possible trace. It was as if Amy had vanished without a trace, and the case remained unsolved for decades, leaving a permanent ache in her family's heart. But science, my friend, has a way of rewriting even the coldest stories. In 2020, a group of forensic specialists decided to reanalyze the evidence with tools that didn't exist in the 80s. One of the most striking findings came from an old report about footprints found in the snow near Amy's house. At the time, technology couldn't extract important details from the marks, but now, with 3D modeling software and footprint simulation, everything changed. The specialists reconstructed the scene and analyzed the distribution of the footprints, considering the weight, height, and even the walking pace of the possible suspect. It was a meticulous job, almost like decoding a riddle. What they discovered was astonishing. The footprints belonged to a man familiar with the area, someone who knew how to move through the snow without drawing attention. And guess what? They managed to connect this profile to a suspect who had been questioned and released at the time due to lack of evidence, a neighbor named John Matthews. Now, with new analysis, DNA recovered from a piece of fabric that had been preserved, but never before analyzed with today's precision, showed a direct match to John. When the police confronted him, he tried to deny it, but the evidence was too strong. After all that time, justice was finally served, and Amy's family was able to find some closure. This story shows that even footprints buried in snow for decades can reveal a truth no one imagined. Science turned the impossible into reality, proving that even when everything seems lost, the truth might just be waiting to be revealed.